Charles L. McGill, a well-established lawyer in the city of Albuquerque with H.H.M., grew up with high hopes and ambitious dreams. He worked hard throughout his adolescent years, graduating as valedictorian at the age of 14, making him the youngest attendant at the high school to graduate so early. His early life was full of success and accomplishments, but his later life is full of despair, depression, and tragedy. This is the tragic story of Charles McGill. Make sure you subscribe to the channel to make sure you never miss out on the latest video essays, The Walking Dead content, and Better Call Saul videos. Charles Lindbergh McGill, better known as Chuck, was born in 1944 to Charles McGill Sr. and Ruth McGill, being their eldest son and older brother to James McGill. He was born and grew up in Cicero, Illinois, spending his childhood and adolescence there. Chuck was always a smart man, excelling in school and graduating early, moving on to law school where he also excelled. But despite all of these accomplishments, it appeared to Chuck that his younger brother Jimmy, who was known not to be as hardworking as his brother, was the favored child of his parents. This stuck with Chuck for the decades to come and was part of the fuel to his future rivalry with Jimmy. In a flashback, the audience learns of Charles McGill Sr.'s acts of generosity and charity at his store, always lending money and other items from the shop to people who claimed they needed it the most. It was the day a man came into the store with a sob story about a sick child that Jimmy warned his father it was a scam, but his father insisted on helping him nonetheless in the case that it wasn't. Jimmy was frustrated with his father because he became known for giving out handouts to anyone with a story, thinking his father was too soft and too nice to run a store. Jimmy then later took some money out of the cash register when Charles Sr. wasn't around, and according to Chuck, who managed the finances for the business, Jimmy had embezzled at least $14,000 over the time the store was opened. It soon got to the point where Charles had to close down shop permanently, and 6 months later, he passed away. Chuck always directly blamed Jimmy for this, but he was still so beloved and favored by their mother. And when their mother Ruth was on her deathbed, Jimmy left her side to get sandwiches, while Chuck insisted Jimmy stay. Jimmy ended up leaving, promising to return quickly, but while he was gone, Ruth spoke her final words to Chuck. Her final words, however, was her crying out for Jimmy, the one who had just left her side. Chuck told her that it was him, but she kept saying Jimmy before peacefully passing away. Chuck was undoubtedly angered at Jimmy, but he didn't express it. He also grew a little bit jealous of his younger brother. Moving out to Albuquerque, New Mexico, Chuck worked other jobs before joining George Hamlin and becoming law partners. George's son Howard Hamlin joined the firm as well, and it became Hamlin McGill, a well-established and successful law firm, winning many landmark cases thanks to Chuck. While Chuck was building up his reputation as a reliable and respected lawyer in Albuquerque, Jimmy was still in Cicero, landing himself in legal trouble. Chuck bailed him out of the situation he was in, but he urged Jimmy to also move out to Albuquerque and start over, pursuing a serious career path and not getting into any more trouble. Jimmy agreed to this and did just that. He landed a job in the mailroom of H.H.M. thanks to Chuck, while he also took courses simultaneously to get himself through law school and to pass the bar exam secretly. Chuck was proud that Jimmy changed his life around and was serious about working, but when Chuck found out Jimmy passed the bar exam and was now a lawyer, he was enraged. But once again, he kept it to himself. He was angered that his brother, who often caused many problems, would steal from his own father's store, has been in legal trouble many times, and would scam innocent people by insurance fraud schemes, was now one to be upholding the law, which Chuck believed to be sacred. To try and prevent Jimmy's success as a lawyer, Chuck went to Howard to ensure H.H.M. would not hire the ex-fraudster. Jimmy never suspected it was Chuck who did this though, and held a grudge against Howard, while Chuck covered up his doings. In 2001, it was at this point where Chuck's life took a turn for the worse, and it was something he would never recover from. It was in this year where he and his wife Rebecca divorced, and soon after the separation, Chuck claims he developed an acute allergy to electromagnetic fields, meaning he suffered from the condition of electromagnetic hypersensitivity, or EHS. This meant he couldn't be in the presence of anything that could possibly emit electromagnetic fields, ridding his house of all electronics, and any guest would have to leave all of their electronic belongings in the mailbox before entering the home. The condition forced Chuck to take 18 months off of work, secluding himself in his house, with Jimmy now becoming his caretaker of sorts, doing all of his shopping and bringing him groceries. But the reality of the situation is that Chuck's disease isn't a physical condition. It's a mental one. Since he's been divorced, has a resentment against Jimmy, and doesn't have much of a personal life outside of his work at H.H.M., the electromagnetic hypersensitivity is an embodiment of his issues, taking on a physical form and acting almost as an excuse. Chuck doesn't have any personal relationships outside of Jimmy. All of his others are work-related, and Jimmy is all that he has now. However, it is the influence of his relationship with Jimmy that determines the outcome of his EHS. When he and Jimmy are getting along, Chuck's condition around electromagnetic fields actually improves. He can withstand being in their presence much longer than he normally could, being capable of going outside, going to work, and being in a room full of electronics and other objects that may be harmful to him otherwise. When working on the Sandpiper Crossing case with Jimmy, and the two are getting along, Chuck would often go for a walk outdoors and visited H.H.M. quite frequently. On the other hand, when the two were on the outs and no longer speaking to one another during the Mesa Verde dispute, where Jimmy tampered with Chuck's documents so he would lose his clients, Chuck's condition ultimately worsened and was even near fatal. Chuck collapsed inside of the print shop Jimmy went to in order to forge the documents while interrogating one of the employees, hitting his head quite hard due to the electromagnetic fields in the building. Chuck knew Jimmy tampered with the papers to make him lose the Mesa Verde clients, so he set him up to admit it on tape. Chuck used the secretly taped confession against Jimmy, especially when he kicked in Chuck's door and ransacked the house looking for it. Jimmy's trial before the bar committee on whether or not he should lose his law license proved to be the definite end to the friendship between the brothers, now only being connected by name and blood. In retaliation, Jimmy put Chuck's alleged condition to the test in front of the committee. He had a live battery slipped into Chuck's front pocket without him knowing for 1 hour and 43 minutes before it was revealed. This proved that his ailment was only something in his mind, causing him to have a meltdown in the court and to be embarrassed. Nonetheless, Jimmy had his law license suspended and could no longer practice for another 12 months. To get back at Chuck, Jimmy went to his own insurance company regarding his law license, but he slipped in a mention about his brother's breakdown in court, effectively raising his insurance costs. Howard took notice of the increase and soon forced Chuck into retirement from H.H.M. This crushed Chuck as he spent his whole career building up the law firm he now is forced to permanently leave. During the last time Chuck and Jimmy ever spoke, Chuck says the most hurtful thing he can to Jimmy, telling Jimmy that he never really mattered to him. All of this soon drove Chuck to the breaking point though, where his EHS became worse than it ever has been, causing him to destroy his house looking for any life power that was still inside. And with no personal relationships anymore, Jimmy wanting nothing to do with him, H.H.M. and Howard no longer in his life, Chuck kicked over one of his gas lanterns, setting his house on fire and committing suicide. Even though Jimmy deeply cared and looked up to his older brother, Jimmy really never grieved over his passing. He kept quiet about Chuck and remained stern when he was brought up, although there were times where he had to face the situation head-on in the public eye. In fact, Jimmy used Chuck's passing to his advantage to have his law license reinstated. Kim found Jimmy's lack of grief very odd, and she suggested to him that he goes and sees a therapist, which Jimmy never does. Howard seems more upset over Chuck's death than Jimmy, telling Jimmy he doesn't think it was an accident and that he does think it was a suicide, claiming himself as the person responsible for it since he forced Chuck to retire from H.H.M. Jimmy picks up on the fact that Chuck's death was partially his own fault, since he did embarrass him and raise his insurance costs, which led to him retiring. But Jimmy doesn't bring this up and leaves it to stew with Howard, making Howard feel guilty for the death. To Jimmy, Chuck and everything he was to him was now dead and left in the past. Chuck felt best in his life when he knew Jimmy was below him, having a lesser job, often being intoxicated, and being in legal trouble. When Jimmy turned his life around and became a lawyer, Chuck felt threatened by it. He couldn't let Jimmy be above him. And when Chuck divorced from Rebecca, all of his problems manifested into one mental condition. Chuck had a letter addressed to Jimmy in the event that he died, and the letter expresses how proud Chuck is of his brother, but it's clear that it was written when Jimmy still worked in the mailroom and wasn't a lawyer. Therefore, the letter meant nothing to Jimmy, and soon, Jimmy would transform from Jimmy McGill to Saul Goodman, trying his best to leave Chuck in the memory of him behind. And that was the tragic story of Charles McGill. If you happen to enjoy this video, please leave a like on it and subscribe for much more. And feel free to share your thoughts on Chuck McGill up to and even after his death. My next Better Call Saul video will be going over the story of Gene Takovic, Jimmy's new persona after the events of Breaking Bad. And if you're interested, make sure you check out my Walking Dead videos on the channel as well, along with video essays. I upload new content weekly that varies from shows to movies, and you definitely won't want to miss out if you're a cinephile. Thanks everyone for watching, stay safe, and have a great day.